So we talked about a lot of stuff in the past year and said we were going to do a lot of things. And we thought we would take an episode before the year is done and see if any of it mattered. Like what did we do the past year? Did we actually make any improvements, anything better? That sort of thing. You go first.
Okay. Well, it's probably best to start at the very beginning of the year and try to figure out where we were or what headspace we were in. In order to see the contrast, you kind of need to know where you started.
That's fair.
And in order to figure that out, I had to go back and sort of do some investigating. I had to kind of click through some of our older videos, which is difficult to do.
Yeah,
But
painful.
yeah, to just kind of see where I was at. I also looked through my journal and some writings and just tried to recreate where I was at.
Yeah.
And I think at the beginning of the year, I was very focused on just sort of improving my art skills just in general, just some vague like improvement. And I'm not totally sure where I was going with it. Like I just wanted to get better at stuff for no real reason, just for the hope that someday I'd be good at stuff.
Sure.
And looking back now, it feels kind of, I don't know, sort of pointless or I don't know. So that was like my main focus is just to improve at being an artist. And I've changed things quite a bit since then. But okay, so the other thing was I was kind of on fire. Like the first half of the year, I was doing really well. I we had like the perfect morning routine down.
Hmm.
I was taking advantage of all my time, getting up super early, and I just felt like I was crushing it. And so that was the first half of the year. I don't know about you, but I was like peak at the beginning of the year. At least it looks that way from over here. But
So you're saying the year started off really good and now you're
yeah,
not so
yes.
good?
Well, I feel better now. Like now that we're at the end, and I went through some stuff that really kind of messed me up, but I feel good again. Like I am ready for another year. Like
Okay.
bring it on. But yeah, about halfway through the year, things went south. Not awful, but I got
Yeah.
really thrown off, and it took me a long time to kind of start building things back up. And I don't think I'm there yet, but I feel good now.
Yeah.
But yes, at the first half of the year, I felt really, really good. So, what about you?
So I made no real attempt to figure out what the hell was going on a year ago, uh, which maybe I could have done some more homework for this episode, but I'm fine with that. What I tried to do in the past week or so, when we had said, okay, let's do an episode where we try to reflect a little bit, I tried to look for things in my mind that I know are different compared to a year ago, right? So what feels different in the way I think and act and see the world and stuff. So I want to share this. This happened a few weeks ago. It was kind of a strange, I don't know, epiphany revelation moment for me. So my wife and I were hanging out with some friends. It actually was a conversation we had with three different friends, on two different occasions, and uh, uh, the these friends were sharing how they can't really be alone with their thoughts, especially at night, and how that means they watch YouTube or television or listen to podcasts. It makes me wonder how much of the podcast traffic that the world gets is from people who don't want to be alone with their thoughts. It's kind of an interesting thing to think about. But this happened with three different individuals talking about this. And oh, yeah, I can't lay in bed at night and just sit there. I have to, I'm listening to a podcast, I'm doing this or that, whatever. And eventually I fall asleep. And so later, my wife and I were having dinner and she had kind of brought that up. I was like, why? why do they do that? That just seems so foreign to me. And so, of course, everyone has their struggles, right? But my wife just, this is not one of them for her. She seems to be very comfortable just being alone with her thoughts and whatever. And so I tried to explain it a little bit. And I said, I mean, you do that because of this existential dread that happens if you aren't occupying your mind with some other thing, a podcast or a show. It can happen at any moment, but it's especially bad at night when you're laying down trying to go to sleep. You start thinking about just awful stuff, terrible stuff. Some of it's just like things that you hate about yourself, or you think about one day I'm going to die and it's probably going to suck, and all that stuff, right? Existential dread.
Yeah.
And so instead of doing that, like the solution to that is to just occupy your mind with something else. So I'm sitting here telling her this. She's like, oh, wow, I had no idea. How do you know that? Did they tell you or something? I said, no, actually, now that I think about it, that was me a year ago. That's what I always did. I could not be alone with my thoughts. I would avoid being alone with my thoughts at, if whenever there was a possibility of that happening. And I would lay in bed every night. And I would, this is like a level of nerddom that most people won't be comfortable with, but I would usually watch Korean StarCraft streams. And that was enough. It was a thing that I understood and was familiar with. So I would watch it and my mind is just occupied with that. But because it was in Korean, it wasn't so engaging that it would keep me awake as much as if I was listening to an English streamer that I could understand. So that was kind of my solution, where I would do that. And every single night I'd be holding the phone right in front of me until I eventually dropped it on my face by falling asleep. And then I'd wake up and put it aside and go to sleep like that. And sometimes even just the act of like setting it aside and having to kind of resituate, it was enough to where I just start thinking and then I can't sleep. And it's like, okay, back to the StarCraft. That's where I was. And it just hit me. Oh my God, I haven't done that in forever. I don't do that anymore. I go to bed pretty consistently within the same, hour, more like 30-minute window most of the time. And sometimes I read a book a little bit, other times I don't, and I just kind of lay down and I go to sleep. And two things have changed there. One is that my body is just way more able and adapted to going to sleep at a consistent time. And that took a lot of effort and a long time to get into place. But now I have this feeling of, okay, I can go lay down in bed and my body will fall asleep relatively quickly. Whereas before it could have been hours. But also my mind is so much more comfortable with that, where I don't have to sit there and struggle with this stuff. I can just kind of relax and think about some things that I choose to think about for the most part. And it's actually a reasonably pleasant experience, and I can go to sleep. But it just hit me because it happened very slowly over time. There wasn't some moment where, okay, now this problem is gone. It's just been this slow process of moving away from that. But now I can just go to bed. And it's
Well,
kind of crazy to look back and think, oh no, that's exactly where I used to be. It's different.
why did that change this year? I mean, if this has been a problem for a long time, what
Because
happened this
of
year?
this podcast, because we keep talking about stuff and coming up with little, challenges or things you have to do, or bringing a lot of attention to that sort of thing. There's been many different specific habits that have kind of added up to this. Like I said, part of it is the body, where my body is able to go to sleep much faster. I mean, even now, even in a reasonably good headspace, if I lay down and then couldn't fall asleep for 3 or 4 hours, it's there's limits to how peaceful my thoughts can be. If you're staring at the ceiling for 3 hours, it starts to get a little anxiety inducing. So part of it is physical, and then the other part is psychological. And it mostly relates to a lot of what we've talked about. We did a meditation challenge for, I think, a month where we were meditating every day. We've talked a lot about just the invasiveness of media and your phone and everything, and trying to calm that down and like let your mind be more comfortable with a lower level of stimulation and things like that. I think all of that just really added up to eventually getting me to this place where, that realization of, oh, It's so different now, and I didn't even realize that it was this different.
One thing that I kind of learned this year or experienced, you hear this all the time, but I really experienced this is in February. I did this, I talked about it a few times. So I did this challenge with my friend where we just
Hmm.
kind of drew a picture every day, whatever. But when we started it, I was so bad at it. And by the end of it, after a month, I went through, all the highs and lows where I, felt great and then I would feel awful about it and I just, did a
Hmm.
really bad job and then I did a great job, whatever. But by the end of it, it kind of balanced out and it became this thing that I actually got pretty good at. And it was just a month, so it was, 30 days or 26, however many, February.
Yeah.
But it hit me the importance of what you were calling earlier this year, continuity.
Mm.
It's like this, I don't know, the art of just doing something sort of every day or I had I really experienced that this year, just being
Yeah.
able to see that. And so anything that I do now, I think about it more in terms of, is this something I can kind of do every day or very frequently as being sort of not the only way of improving at it, but just the most surefire way of improving at it. And I've stopped seeing, I don't know if I've stopped, but I've gotten better at seeing,
Hmm.
some sort of accomplishment as being, like some giant thing I need to conquer. And now I see it more as like this thing. It's kind of a slow burn. Like you take your time with it. You make sure you get it every day. Like just learning how to, I don't know, take things in smaller amounts. And so that's been like a really big thing this year.
I've I think that's been a big area for me as well. Just getting back into playing piano a little bit, and then even very recently, like I picked up the guitar for the first time, got some new strings, started playing around, uh, and the approach to that is so vastly different than what I would have done before, which even just a year ago or 2 years ago, my thought would have been, I'm playing guitar again. We're going to do 8 hours today. I'm going to blow off every other single thing. I'm not even going to think about anything else. I'm just going to throw myself into it and do nothing but that. And that would have been my thought. Like, that's what you need to do. And now the thinking has more to do with that idea of, what we were calling continuity of whatever I do today, I need to be feeling good tomorrow to where I can do it again and then do it again. I don't, if I play guitar for 20 hours in one weekend, it doesn't really matter. I need to be playing it, the guitar, the piano, whatever I'm getting into. I need to be playing that a year from now. That's what's going to matter. So how do you set
Right.
that up? And I've even started playing some like little games with myself of on the piano. Say, okay, I want to play a bit, so I'm going to sit down for 10 minutes and that's it. And if I complete the 10 minutes, awesome. The next day I get to do 11 minutes. And then if I complete that, the next day I get to do 12. But if I don't, if I miss the session, then it goes backwards. And so it's kind of like this, I'm trying to build up the amount of time that I'm allowed to play, but only by consistency. And that's, I mean, it's kind of
Yeah, that's
silly, but
fun.
it's been fun, and I actually think it's a really effective way to do that, where you have such a desire to just throw yourself into it, but then when you do kind of give into that and just blow up your life and throw yourself into it, it's like it's so disruptive and it's so prone to burnout that you wind up just not doing it anymore, and like forcing yourself to kind of channel that excitement into trying to develop something consistent over time. That's just a concept I had never even thought about before, and it's been really, really good for me.
Well, we did that 2-minute challenge thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And actually that's another thing that I did this year is I started fiction writing for the first time in my life
Mhm.
just by doing it, 2 minutes a day. And just seeing that you can build a whole new thing with just such a short amount of time in a day, as long as it's, over a long amount of time,
Yeah.
that was a cool thing to see.
That
And
was
and that's a
also,
box I get to check is the fiction writing. It's like,
yeah,
okay, I did that this year.
yeah. Um, and it's also just it's so eye-opening when you really restrict your time like that. It reveals to you how different a chunk of time can be. 2 minutes that is intently focused on exactly the right things without any kind of wasted time or waffling around like that. I mean, you can easily spend half an hour getting nothing done or 2 minutes getting something valuable done if you really think about it. And that to me was the biggest reveal of that experiment was when you cut your time down so hard but you're so excited about something, it really makes you pay attention to what matters and what doesn't. Like with the piano playing for me, it really revealed very quickly that what matters here is memorizing the music, like getting it into your head to where you can visualize it and know where your fingers go. It's not technique, it's not repeating the same thing, trying to build up the speed or anything. Like it was none of that. It's just, can I remember what I learned yesterday? And so you really start focusing in on, okay, how do you do that? And those ideas of spaced repetition and visualization and recall and all that stuff like really come up, but you really start getting good at getting something out of that 2 minutes. So that was just very eye opening for me and something I still really think about a lot.
Another thing we did was we started writing. We started, keeping
Yeah.
journals, and that was a big one. I I started carrying around this little pocket journal or, thing that I write ideas in with me everywhere. I just keep it in my pocket all the time with a tiny little pen and a tiny little
Yeah.
book. And that's made a big difference in just keeping track of ideas and just it makes me feel like I want to pay attention to things because there's a potential good idea there.
Mm,
So if I'm watching a TV show, I'll have it right next to me and I'll just write down something that I like or whatever. Or if I'm at work and I'm, listening to a podcast while I'm working or whatever, I'll just write down like little ideas and stuff. And so I can take I've filled like 6 of them. I could take any of those, just flip through them, and I have all these ideas, and it's just this endless source of inspiration. That's something that I started this year that I really am very happy about. Also, I keep, just a normal journal at home, and I use that as a tool to work through thoughts or to try to catalog things and just remember, keep track of what I'm doing. Like what when I was trying to do or think back for this episode, I'm like, okay, well, what was I doing this time last year? I just opened the journal and started looking through it. It's like, oh yeah, um,
yeah, I wish I'd done
yeah.
that. I That is something I wish I had done a little more of. I haven't really been journaling, but uh, I'm more than ever like really doubled down on if I am working on something, there's almost nothing that I'm going to work on, whether it's, working on code stuff or playing an instrument or anything. There's going to be two things there. One is a place to just write. You know, I a lot of that does wind up being on a computer or phone for me, which I know isn't the best, but it's around most of the time. But then also the spaced repetition. And this probably goes back to farther than a year ago, but still, I don't listen to a podcast. I don't read an article or really anything without pulling out at least a few things and putting them into my spaced repetition system. Like I will, formulate some question and some answer on anything that I find valuable or interesting. And it's gotten to the point where I'm just so tuned to that I can be listening to some podcast. Maybe it's not even something I'm that interested in, but then there'll be these little moments of, oh, that's a spaced repetition thing. That's going in there because I need to recall that later. And that's just like a fundamental part of the way I operate now. I That's just everything. Um, Everything I listen to or read. So that's been like pretty pretty impactful for me.
So the space repetition thing is something that I haven't kept up with so much. I
Yeah.
again at the beginning of the year I was killing it, and then I totally fell off and just haven't touched it in months. And so that's going to be one of my goals for next year for sure.
Yeah.
is getting back on the space repetition train.
Well, so shameless plug, obviously, but and we can get into this too, but my major project for the year has been trying to build something that I care about that isn't my job and whatever, right? And so that I've been trying to build my ideal version of a spaced repetition, app service type of thing. And I've been putting lots and lots of time into that. So that's what I've been using. And of course, this is kind of, it's by definition biased because I'm the one making it. So I'm making it the way I think it ought to be made. So of course, it makes me happy to use it because I'm the one who did it. I've kind of designed it for me. But the hope is that, you know, before the end of time, I will get this out to where you could use it and maybe you'll like it better than whatever you're using now or not using
I
now.
know I'll like it better. So if you could finish that or give me a little tester app, I would
Yeah,
be
well,
happy to test it out.
and I will as soon as I'm comfortable with. I need to be able to give it to you to where you can use it without having
Yeah,
to
yeah.
go, oh, hey, it just nuked all of your stuff. Sorry, start again. Like I need to be past that point.
Okay, well let's talk about that because one of the biggest thing for me, and I think for you too, this year we started doing the scary thing. That's what we
Yeah.
called it, our quest. And that kind of that that was the biggest driver of my year. How is yours going? I mean, you're building this app, you decided to start doing it, and you actually started doing it. Uh,
And
how
I'm
has that been since
yeah,
you started up till
and,
now?
I'm still doing it. Like I worked on it today for 3 hours. So, yeah, still really pushing that boulder. Yeah, so part of me doesn't want to be too like self-congratulatory because it's not
Yeah.
done. It's not out there. It's not at a point where other people can realistically use it. It's not for sale or anything like that. So there's a lot of painful things to go between here and there.
Well,
But
to me, it's let's talk about like your decision to do this. Like, forget about where it's at, progress wise, or
yeah,
if you're almost done or whatever. Your decision to do this, you don't regret that, right?
no, definitely not. Um, the alternative to doing this would have been to doing a bunch of nothing.
Right.
So
Yeah.
even if it even if I just completely fell off the wagon tomorrow and never finished it and had nothing but guilt and shame about having gone this far and stopped, it still is would have been a lateral move compared to just doing nothing, right? Spending my time
Right.
playing more video games or scrolling the internet and stuff. So compared to where I would have been, it's like it's only upside. But even aside from that, I now feel so comfortable with this idea that I can work on something like this. And what would happen at the beginning, or not even the beginning, if you rewind previously, I mean, I'd certainly attempted this kind of thing many times. If, okay, I have this idea and I know that I have the skill to pull it off, whatever, I'm going to start this project and it's going to be awesome. And I'll, put this out in the world and the world will love it. Right. And so you wind up starting this thing and it starts to spin up and there's of course this excitement and I start pouring lots of time into it, but then there's also this huge psychological, I don't know, this churn, this constant analysis of, oh, is this good, is it going to be good enough, is this dumb idea? And within that, I'm also just spending so much time on it that it's kind of blowing up everything else around it, where I'm not actually doing my real job enough. And so I'm getting behind and I'm not really taking care of the other normal stuff that happens in my life. And it just kind of winds up being a disaster and becomes very anxiety inducing. So now, with this thing that I've been doing for, I don't know, when did we actually start this? Was it a year ago? It wasn't a year ago.
Um, It was about midway through the year, I think.
Okay, so we'll say 6 to 8 months
Maybe
ish.
April or something.
Okay, well, I
Yeah,
don't know how to do
6 to 8 months.
month
Yeah,
math, so okay.
6 to 8 months. We'll see.
Yeah, it was from now to April ago that we did this. Um, it's just so much more comfortable. Where I mean, with very few exceptions, I'd wake up, I go get myself situated at a coffee shop that I like, and then I just go, okay, the next 2 hours I'm gonna spend on this, and I have this monstrous list of different things that different ideas or to do items or whatever, and so I just kind of and we've talked about this before with that continuity idea where I usually have left myself notes from the previous session of, hey, do this first, this is easy, this is fun, whatever, and like I have all these little things to kind of get me back into it, and then I just spend that 2 hours doing it. And it's, I mean, there's moments of frustration, but for the most part, it's really enjoyable. Like, I'm not sitting there for 2 hours going, oh, is this dumb? Should I have been doing something else? Am I going to be good enough? I'm just doing it. And I'm just kind of enjoying it and thinking, hey, let's build this little thing and let's try that and let's fix this thing or make it faster. And it's really nice. Like, it's just a very enjoyable, rewarding 2 hours to spend on it. And that's just what I do every day. I look forward to it. I wake up in the morning and I still kind of hate waking up, but I do it and I get out there and I'm like, awesome. I get to do this again. It's really nice. It's so, so different. Just the entire experience. So different than what it was, you know, a year or two ago. How's it going for you?
Okay. Yeah, because I also started doing the scary thing this year,
Mm-hmm.
and I think if I'm looking at this year, I think it certainly wouldn't be the year of progress. I don't have tons of progress or anything, which is what I wanted it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of disappointed at first, but when I start looking back on the whole year and comparing it to previous years, it's, oh, okay, this was the year of like decisions. I decided that I wanted to do, sort of work on independent art rather than education or freelancers or anything. So I made that decision early on in the year, like in January. And I realized that in order to work on it, I kind of had to navigate through a lot of difficult things. In order to give up, in order to make some more time for the independent art, I had to give up freelance and I had to kind of take a break from the education stuff, which was easy. But in order to give up freelance, I had to be making a little bit more money. So I had to figure out a way to make more money, which led me down the path of, okay, I need to, maybe I can get a raise and, sort of a promotion. So I figured out how to get that. I was able to do that, which freed me up. I was able to let go of the freelance and I had to finish up a bunch of freelance that I currently had. So about 4 or 5 months in, I was able to let go of the freelance, um, and start working on my independent art, which has been a very slow moving thing. But I started it, and with that decision to do it, I have not regretted, and I have not. I wouldn't say I haven't questioned it. I've questioned it in a way of, is this a dumb idea, or is
Yeah.
this, am I going to look stupid, or am I not good enough, or whatever? Like I've had all of those thoughts. But my decision to start doing it, I haven't really wavered on, and I've loved working on this,
Yeah.
and and it's been the same thing. Every time it starts getting hard, I remember that it's not about trying to force myself and you know bleed myself dry to accomplish this thing. It's okay. Well, let's make it easier. Let's find a way to make it easier so it'll work long term. And so that's just sort of been this filter every time something difficult happens. And compared to previous years where I've tried to do, personal projects or whatever, this year has been totally different in that it's just continued. You know, Things have come up, some big things this year that have kind of messed me up, but I've been able to just get back to it. And it, I don't know, I'm just like dedicated to this thing and it feels really, really good.
Yeah, I guess if I had to kind of pick one like theme or major
Yeah, yeah.
change, it's been that. It's been that it just feels like the actual process of doing something uh has just changed for me so much to where I just enjoy, I mean, not for everything, right? But like I've gotten to that point with different things where, with the main quest, I like sitting down and doing it. Um, so I've been listening to this podcast just recently with Peter Attia and Lane Norton. He's a power lifter. I think he just won like worlds. So, at least in his weight class, the strongest power lifter alive right now. And what was interesting about listening to him, so he shares a lot of thoughts about powerlifting and all that, but he talks about his training and what he does and how he trains really hard, which of course you train really hard if you're trying to be the best in the world at lifting. But he keeps talking about how he just likes it. He would say that some of the mistakes he would make is where he'd go to a meet where you lift, as hard as you can. You're doing the meet. It's very difficult. And you do a lot of training leading into that. And you come out of it. And if he felt too good, like he would say that, like, oh, I felt a little too good. So I wound up just going right back into the training, even though it wasn't the smart thing. He just wanted to do more. Like, oh, I want to get back in there and lift more and really push myself. Like, he just seems to really enjoy the process of training really hard. And that's what has led to him being the best at doing this. He just really likes the training. I was also listening to an interview with, I can't remember her name, unfortunately. I'll try to link it if I can, but she's like the world's best ultra runner. I might have talked about her before in the podcast, but she's just like dominates the competition in terms of these ultra running events. She'll do 100-mile events, 200-mile events, insane stuff like that. Like a race that takes days, and you have to strategically decide: do I sleep or keep running? I mean, insane stuff. And she talks about how it's on the Rich Roll podcast. He's asking her like, "What do you, what is your training like? What do you do? How do you do that?" Just I just do it. I just like it. The way she talks about it is like it's this huge privilege to be somebody who can do that. She's in agony running for literally days. Incredible pain. She talks about one event where she went blind because I guess your body can be so messed up from the endurance thing that like the something about your eyes gets inflamed to where you can't see anymore. And like that's how hard she goes. She had to have somebody run in front of her and like shout to her, "Okay, it's like a little bit of a left turn, follow my voice," and she finished the race that way and obviously won. But she just talked about that, how even that she just loves doing it, like, even the pain. She calls it her pain cave. She likes being in her pain cave. What? Okay, I'm like any mortal person would not want to do that, but that's what makes her the best in the world. She just likes doing it, not, oh, I love winning, I gotta be the best. Lane Norton isn't saying, oh, I'm so driven because I gotta be the strongest guy in the world. Just like, I really like lifting weights. I really like training. It seems to be a common thread with the people who are really good at stuff is that they don't necessarily want to be really good at stuff. I mean, I'm sure that's part of it, but the main driver is just they seem to just really like doing it. And having done some self-reflection on many of these things, it's like, man, I mean, yeah, I do. I like doing this stuff, but I get so fixated and obsessed on the outcome of it. I can't even sit down and play piano, something I used to really enjoy, without immediately like spinning up all these thoughts in my head of, oh, I'll be super good and I'll, start playing shows and stuff and whatever, like silly fantasy stuff. But that's just always what would happen. And so trying to both consciously and then just incidentally trying to make this transition of just getting to the point where I can do something and just really enjoy that simple act of doing it without being obsessed with the outcome, without any of that stuff, just being in that moment, doing that thing and really liking it. like I'm not there yet, but I feel like I've made so much progress on that. And it's not only is it just objectively better, provably better. I mean, we've talked through, the Batman effect. We read and talked about the inner game of tennis and some of those concepts there where the people who tend to do really well are just having a good time, not overthinking that much, really being in the moment. Like it's better, but also it's just so much more enjoyable to be in that headspace. So that's been a major point of progress, and I'm really really happy that it has been because it's just really made a difference for me.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed this year, or started really paying attention to, it, I brought it up in one episode at some point this year where I was working on my painting and it started going well. I started feeling really good about it. And then I start, fantasizing about it, being
Mm-hmm.
great. And then, you know, it sort of blew up into this, oh my God, I'm so excited that everything's going well. And it tipped, like it went too far and it screwed me up for, the next day and
Mm-hmm.
following that. It just kind of, it built everything too high. And then everything I did after that just wasn't good enough, and it just kind of destroyed me. And so now, I've begun to recognize that feeling of, nope, I'm feeling too good about the outcome of
Yeah,
something, not
yeah.
the process, the outcome of it. I'm thinking too much about the finished painting and the result of that or whatever. And I've just started to pay attention to that and really try to stop myself from, I don't know, I wish we had a name for it, but it's like that fantasizing about a
Mm-hmm.
success, trying to stop myself from doing that. And it keeps me being able to go much longer and continue enjoying the process rather than, burning yourself out with this epic, fantasy win or something. It's just, nope, keep your eyes on the process, keep enjoying the day to day, and just, don't become overwhelmed with this feeling of success or, don't
Mm-hmm.
pay attention to the outcome. Focus on the process.
Yeah, I would notice that with StarCraft. So, okay, one of the other things that I did this year was we had set this goal. I had set this goal of trying to make it into Grandmaster League in StarCraft 2, and I did. Very happy and proud of that. But during that process of trying to get this, achieve this very high level in this game, I would notice exactly that. I might have a really good session where I sit down and I play and I feel great and I win a lot and it's just, man, awesome. And it's almost like two things can go wrong. One is if I do that for long enough, I'll get fatigued and then start to lose. And then all of that excitement, playing good adrenaline, it turns into anxiety and frustration. I was actually listening to somebody talk about this recently, how there's the difference between anxiety and nervousness and excitement is cognitive. Like it's just your interpretation of it. And so one of the ways that would go wrong is, I would kind of make that switch of all that adrenaline and energy would go from excitement and confidence to frustration and anger. So that's one thing that could go wrong, where I just play for long enough and it turns to that. The other is where I stop at the right time. So I've played this session, maybe I play for an hour, hour and a half or something, feeling great. And then I get away from it and I'm thinking about it and I just start thinking about how great I am at this game now
Right,
and
right.
how I've just like I got it figured out and I'm really good and I'll probably be a pro player within a couple weeks cuz it's just this trajectory I'm on is unstoppable. And inevitably, like there was never an exception to this. I would come back the next day and play terrible, absolutely terrible. It's like it would just rot in my brain overnight. And it was that exact thing where you start thinking about this outcome, not the thing you're doing, but the result of it, the fantasy of it.
Yep.
And it just totally goes wrong. And that's been a major lesson as well, is like recognizing that right away where, man, I really want to go take a shower and spend 20 minutes just thinking about how great I am after this great session of, I mean, it could be StarCraft, it could be anything else. And you just learn, no, you want to, it's
Right.
fun, don't do that. Just, reflect on what you did, take the lessons from the games and whatever, but like keep your mind focused on the thing, not the fantasy related to the thing. And that's been a major shift for me.
I definitely wouldn't say that I have solved that or
Oh,
fixed it completely, but it's a thing that I recognize now where I
yeah,
tell myself there's like this red flashing light, like, okay, you're going too far, you're thinking too much about this,
yeah,
lay off, go do something else, get your mind off of it. Otherwise, it will destroy you.
yeah. I don't
So,
I,
yeah,
I don't mean to imply I've solved it either, but I at least know that I shouldn't be doing that.
right.
One other thing I've noticed, this is kind of jumping around, but um negative thought loops, I think is what they're usually called. Uh this would happen all the time. Go for a walk, almost any time where I'm moving and not, my mind isn't occupied by something, like I'm not looking at my phone or whatever. Mind just starts to go. I start to think about stuff, and this used to just happen all the time, and I didn't even realize it because I never really thought about it. But I would get into these very negative thought loops where I would start thinking about something, and it would be something bad. Maybe it's a real thing that happened. Maybe it's not, but it would just turn into something very negative, like an argument with a person where maybe I had some like mildly negative exchange with somebody, but this would just turn into this whole like verbal fight and some kind of terrible, nasty situation. Like this thing would just spin out in my head. And I never realized that this was really happening, which seems crazy to say, but I just really didn't. Where I would just always have these very, or often wind up in these very negative, like mental spaces. And probably a lot of this came from that month of meditation that we did, or just talking a lot about that. But just learning that that is a very common thing that my mind will get into, and just going, oh hey, I'm getting into one of those negative thought loops here, let's not do that, and setting that aside. Like that's just something I do pretty instinctively now, and I didn't even realize that was what was happening, never mind having any kind of solution to it a year or two ago. And that's been a major shift. And part of that I think was the meditation, where just you kind of learn to you know notice your thoughts and detach yourself a little bit from the things rushing through your brain. But also, we've talked so much about getting away from constant stimulation, when I'm putting your phone away, that kind of thing, and the value of letting your mind be more still, just the importance of your own thoughts and being able to think about the things you want to think about. Weirdly, one of the most impactful things was the 2 minute challenge. For me, it was, I'm going to play piano for 2 minutes a day. When you do that, the time is so severely limited that you realize, man, I really need to be able to think about playing piano. That's one of the major ways to make progress, is just me being able to think about it. But, I'm working throughout the day, I'm doing other stuff. When do you genuinely think about it? For me, it was, well, every morning I take the dog for a walk for 20 or 30 minutes. That's 20 or 30 minutes of thinking time. And I could spend at least some of that thinking about playing the piano. And when I did that, it made this huge difference in my ability to recall, what the piece I was playing and everything. So I mean, it might have been cheating, I don't know, but I learned a lot by just thinking about what I learned in that 2 minute session the day before. And so it just kind of made it very clear that, man, the stuff you think about is really valuable. It feels not very tangible, like your mind can just kind of do whatever because you're not doing anything, but that's wrong. You can make it's such a valuable thing. And so why would you spend it thinking about terrible, anxiety inducing made up situations that never happened? Like that seems like the worst possible waste of your time when you could spend it on things that are so much better. And that's been a major just difference in where I'm at now versus a year ago, and I'm really happy about that. It's made a huge difference, not just in my mood, because if you think about anxiety inducing things, they induce anxiety, but also it kind of gives me this ability to spend my thought time on things that I want to.
I yeah, I experienced that same thing with, well, the 2-minute challenge that we did when I was doing the writing. I would, I would sit down and just try to write some type of fiction. I mean, it sucked, but I was doing it and I was
Yeah, yeah.
enjoying it. But the first few times I did it, I sit down and then I try to kick my brain on and think of something and then write it down and then it sucks or whatever and then it's over with. But after a while, you start thinking, okay, throughout the day, because I was doing this at night, throughout the day, I would start thinking, oh, that'd be a good thing to write about. And then you start thinking about it.
Hmm.
And you can spend hours thinking about it.
Yeah.
And then when it comes time to write for 5 minutes, whatever, it's there because you've created it in your mind beforehand. And I experienced the same thing with the challenge I did in February with my friend, where we had to draw a picture. The first half of the challenge, I sit down to do it, and then I try to start thinking of things. But the second half was like, okay, I'm going to think of things, create this, fill this well of inspiration and information, and then when it comes time to do the thing, to drink from the well, there's plenty there. And yes, absolutely. Your time spent thinking about something is possibly even more valuable than your time spent doing it. Like it's,
Hmm.
but you're right. When you do it, it's tangible. When you're away from it, you don't consider it tangible because you don't see anything getting done. But actually, it's happening in your mind.
I almost thought of it kind of opposite, where the 2 minutes that I spent on the piano, that was me trying to put a bunch of new stuff into my mind, and then like that's there for when I think about it.
Yeah,
Those,
yeah.
I mean, it's the same thing, but it, it was just so revealing on how important you thinking about something really is.
Well, they're both extremely important because when you sit down, say if I sat down to write, I start writing and I run into a problem. Either I can't think of anything to write about, or I can't construct a sentence or whatever.
Yeah.
That is the test, and then it reveals these issues, problems, or just questions that you have, and that's what you end up thinking about as you walk away from it. So
Yeah.
you have to have both. If all you do is think about
Yeah.
something, then you know.
Right, of course. It's different too though, because you're doing a creative outlet where you're trying to create something from your mind and then write it down. I was in some sense doing the opposite, where I'm just taking a piece of music that somebody else wrote and I'm trying to learn it. I'm not really expressing myself creatively or anything. So there was probably some different considerations there. But at the same time, you're still doing the thing, finding all these problems or things that you have to figure out, solve, and then you're letting your mind kind of work on that. But I don't know, it's just interesting that they're similar but different, and regardless, just that thought time is so valuable. I really wonder, I don't know how to spin this into like a literal challenge, but there was some way to try and just document what and how much, like what you spend your thoughts on and how long you think about that throughout the course of a day would be hard to do, but really revealing.
Well, we learned. Sorry, I was
Just,
choking on my
yeah.
wine, but I'm okay now. We learned in our uh, the novelty problem episode, or when we were talking about that, is that it's very easy to think about things, or you really want to think about them when they're
Mhm.
novel and new.
Yeah.
And after 2, 3 weeks or something, of that thing being really new and exciting, your time spent thinking about it starts to fall off. And when you just recognize that problem, it's like, oh, you're turning orange now.
Oh, it is 7:30. one
I don't
moment.
remember what I was gonna say because
No, no,
it's
the
not
novelty
novel.
problem. You spend all your time thinking about something when you're excited about it.
Well, yeah, and so when you sit down to play piano, for that 2 minutes, you hit on something new, right? Because new information that you're
Yeah.
gonna learn, all of a sudden it's new and exciting, and then you just think about it. And if you keep doing that day after day, you're constantly finding new, exciting, novel information, and it keeps refreshing and keeps refreshing, and so you keep thinking about it. It stays interesting, and that's something I've noticed about, my main quest where I'm trying to build this, independent art world type stuff. It's
Hmm.
if I leave it alone for too long, everything starts to sink and it's not interesting. So it takes some effort to kind of kick up the dust and make it interesting again. And then if you do that regularly, it stays interesting. You stay thinking about it, even when you're not working on it.
And also, just I like what you said there with the 2 minute challenge or whatever, where you're kind of dosing it carefully to where it feels novel and you're able to keep it feeling novel for a much longer time. Whereas if you aren't doing that, you're just dumping all your time into something. You burn through that novelty phase very quickly, and you pour all your time into it and you wind up in a place where you're kind of just burned out or super fatigued and overwhelmed with it. And so that it's like you're kind of killing that novelty effect by just it's like when you hear a song you really like and so you listen to it on repeat 1,000 times and then you go, wow, I'm super sick of this song because I just listened to it over and over 1 billion times in a row. Like
Right.
ideally, maybe that's fine for a song, but when you're trying to adhere to the principles of continuity, that's not what you want. You want it to feel exciting and new every day. And then the other thing too there is that even when you do get excited about something, if you're not careful, you're thinking about it all the time, but it's pretty easy to wind up thinking about the wrong thing all the time. Like that future fantasy of, oh, it's going to be so
Right.
awesome, and like you're more daydreaming than you are actually thinking about that thing. And so you get burned out without ever really even putting your thoughts in the right place.
Right. I've noticed myself doing that.
Yeah.
Like I will think about just the project itself, you know, being, oh, I want to have this and I want to have that or whatever. And then at the end of the day, I'm thinking, oh, I've made zero progress. I
Right.
haven't written any story, I haven't come up with any new drawing or painting ideas. Like all I've done is think about the idea of thinking about this, like
Right.
it
You
didn't
really
go
just
anywhere.
daydreamed all day and
Yeah.
that's it.
Okay. One thing I wanted to bring up is at okay, so at the beginning of the year, I felt awesome. I was doing great. At least looking back, it seemed like I was doing great. I was waking up at like 5:15, spending an hour or two working on my stuff in the morning, whatever. Like I can't I can't picture me being better. Like I was doing really well.
Right.
And then I got COVID in like August. Okay. And
Yeah.
it was 2 weeks where I it's not like I went to the hospital. It wasn't that bad, but it was bad enough to where I could not get off the couch for like 2 weeks. And
Yeah.
so I spent 2 whole weeks just everything just falling apart. Like everything I had built up
Yeah.
just was gone. And it took me I feel like I'm still reeling from that. It just wiped everything out. And I would have told you earlier that year that I had it figured out. I mean, I think I did tell you that. Is that, I think I got it. Like all you have to do is wake up early, just enjoy the process, whatever. Everything's
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
be great. Like we solved it. And this happened, and then well, a couple other things also happened which were equally bad. But I watched everything just fall apart. Like everything. My health, my happiness, my productivity, my
Yeah.
everything, all inspiration, everything just was gone. And months go by where I can't just like I can't get a foothold in anything. I'm just like
Mhm.
it was really hard. And some days were good and some weeks, went better than others, but it was nothing like that continuity that we're we always talk about. Like it was gone, and I just could not get it going again. And it it was like a a fire, and I'm throwing the logs on, and I keep throwing them
Mm-hmm.
on, and as long as the flame is big, it keeps burning, and I got it burning like really hot. And then I walked away from it for 2, 3 weeks, and it was like dead cold, and it was freezing, and it's gone. And I like throw another log on, and nothing happens, just a poof of ash or whatever. Like it doesn't matter. You keep throwing logs on there, and you're like, why? This was working before. It's not working
Yeah.
now. Like, what is going on? And it was just so frustrating. And I realized, I started just recently in the last month or so. I've started to feel really good again, and I've started to get back into a routine, and I'm excited, and I feel like happy again, and things are going well again. It's not quite that simple of a progression of things are great,
Mm-hmm.
things are awful, and now things are all better again. Like it's been up and down throughout the whole thing. But
Sure.
I have been feeling good the last week, and it's because I started going back and listening to podcasts that I was listening to before that really motivated me, and listening or reading stuff that has always kind of motivated me or whatever. And it got me thinking that like just listening to these conversations on this podcast that I really liked, this like independent art podcast. Um, it made me really excited again. It sort of reminded me, like, oh yeah, that's the thing I like. That's what I want again. And it just listening to a little conversation made me like really excited again. And then I went back and listened to some of our stuff where for this episode, and I'm listening to the perfect morning routine and blah blah blah, and I'm like, holy shit, like I was so much better than like I suck now, like what's going on? But it started getting me kind of excited again, like, well,
Mm-hmm.
I did it then, I can do it again now or whatever. But I guess I realized that I'm just not as invincible as I thought or wished I was. And you can figure all this stuff out, and it can just go cold, and the fire can completely die again easily. It doesn't take much at all. And I thinking of next year, or thinking of the year as a whole, it's like when everything dies, how do you keep it going? How do you keep the fire burning? I think you just have to start small. And I kept expecting myself to just jump right back into things, and I
Mm-hmm.
kept trying to do that, and it just wasn't working. And so what it took was just like some really small stuff, like a little bit of inspiration here and there, whatever, and it kind of just started building, and I just got a little spark and little twigs, whatever, and it started burning again, and I feel better. Like I don't know. So for the next year, I want to be aware of the fact that it can all fall apart at any moment, and the fire can go out, and you have to start all over. But I want to be prepared for that. Okay, I'm taking this metaphor way further than I wanted to, but I'll have
No.
some twigs close by. I'll have a box of matches, whatever. Like I want to prepare for when that happens, rather than see
Yeah.
it as like you run out and you just, oh God, what do I do? I have whatever.
No, I think that's actually a super important thing that we've kind of talked about a couple times, but it's like a hard thing to talk about because you don't really want to. You want to
Well,
talk
yeah,
about being awesome and doing awesome things and the secret to life and the secret to being, an absolute machine of productivity. Like that's what we want to talk about. You don't want to talk about what to do when you're in the dumpster and you can barely even get out of bed and everything just feels like crap. Like that's not very fun. But it's also maybe some people don't experience this, but that's reality for me. I've gone through periods of feeling really great and then it pretty much always winds up with something happens, something blows it apart, and then I'm just
yeah,
where you said. This might have fallen outside of the past year, but I remember, I got married and the certain things of just around that time just got me so stressed out and so disrupted my life. I mean, it was obviously it was wonderful, but the stress and the life getting so torn apart that it put me in that same place where I'm just like I can't even get myself back into being a human being. And trying to
Right.
figure that out of okay, what do you do then is like a really vital thing. There's this one I don't know, just offhand line or little bit of wisdom that I heard and really took to heart with when I was really working on StarCraft was I think this was from the chess world. We're saying how the line between winning and losing is razor thin, and you wouldn't think so. You would think that the best chess player in the world is always going to smash somebody below him, but they don't. You watch their games and it's always like really close, and they just, I mean, they like eke it out. They're just a little bit better. There's a couple small opportunities that come up and they take them. You have this fantasy of just somebody who's really good at something. They're just so good. They're just so much better than everyone else, but they're not. I was watching the World Cup, watching Messi, the most people consider the best player of all time at this point. And he's incredible. You watch him just handle the ball, pass and move and look for opportunities. And like you realize that he's the best player alive right now, but also at the same time, it's like he's just a little better than everyone else. He's just a little bit faster, a little bit quicker or whatever, but it's never like he doesn't just dominate. He doesn't just score a goal every 5 minutes. It's like he gets one more goal than the other guy. It's so small. And I feel like that's what's happening when you're doing really well. You think that you've just got it all figured out and you're on fire and life is just clicking along for you. But really it's a tiny difference between that and just things really not working. I mean, and we've realized this I think in the past year about that process of working on your main quest, this project that you really care about, right? It feels easy. You wake up, you get set up, you work on it, you're painting, I'm coding, but it's like, oh, this is nice. This feels really good. And that's just like the perfect place to be. But when you think about what actually goes into it, it's like all these tiny things that easily could have gone wrong. You're like, oh, I went to bed at 11 last night instead of 12:30 because I'm like, I kind of know to do that now. And I'm able to make those tiny decisions. Or there's just all these little things that are set up around that to where you're able to be in that place and in the right state of mind to do it, but you start messing up some of those tiny little things around it and it all falls apart. It feels like you're on top of the world, you got it figured out, but like it's really hanging in the balance on these little tiny things. And so the flip side is, when you're a
Yeah.
mess, there's just so much that has to be put back. And one of the amazing things about depression is it makes you not want to do any of the things that you need to do that could help improve the depression. Or maybe it's not even full-blown depression, but just being in a bad state. You're not motivated,
Right.
so you don't have the motivation to do the things that help you feel motivated. Like it's just this vortex of suckiness. And so it's
I mean,
just, you have to respect how difficult that really is and never take it for granted that you're doing well.
well, I respect it. I mean, you know, I was, you know, we have a podcast where we talk about, I don't know, this stuff.
Yeah,
And
sure.
I would, I want to be the person who can say, oh, yeah, this is how you do it, blah, blah, blah. But, and then I'm thinking about this while I'm sitting on the couch drinking my third whiskey while I'm watching some true crime and it's 3 a.m. in the morning. And I'm like, yeah, this is not good. Uh, I mean, that's like what I did for like a long time this year. It's just
Yeah.
I know I should go to bed because the mornings are important. I know that waking up and, going back to that schedule where I'm really happy. Like I know how to do that because I've talked about it, we've recorded it, and
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't care anymore. I don't want to do it. And you end up in this place that you might know how to get out of, but you
Right.
can't, or you just don't want to.
Yeah.
Like, you just go in the opposite direction. So I I feel much better now. But yeah, that that's just something that happened this year where I
Hmm.
just went in the total opposite direction of where I was before. But
Yeah. I don't think there's ever going to be a place where that's just not a risk, or that it won't even
yeah,
happen. Like it'll happen,
right,
and you figure out how to make the low a little less low, and you figure out how to get back to somewhere good faster, right? Like
right.
it's I don't think you eliminate that from your life ever. Like you got COVID, right? You can't, I mean, you can't plan around that. That's a thing that happens. or
Yeah,
or whatever
but yeah,
sickness, right? I mean, you just you have to be ready for things to disrupt your life,
right.
and you
And
gotta figure out how to make it work.
that's what I want to remember for the
Right.
next years is okay, these things are going to happen again. Something's going to come up, the structure is going to be obliterated, whatever. You have to leave the breadcrumbs to find your way back, or you have to roll down the ladder before you fall into the bottomless pit again. Like
Yeah.
you have to prepare for this. So remember what works and what doesn't, and remember that for next time.
Yeah.
Or
And to
yeah,
me, there's also this risk of when things are going really well, you're at risk of winner's tilt, where you
yes,
start losing. You become too confident in yourself. You start to fantasize about how great you are. You lose the respect for all the work you really had to put in to get there. You start thinking that stuff doesn't matter quite as much, and it winds up like you're flying high, but it becomes more and more fragile, and it just leads to some crash and burn, and then you're in a bad place. That's a tough lesson to learn, um, and even harder to like actually figure out.
on a happier note, I painted for like 6 hours today because I
Nice.
took like 2 weeks off of work, and I get to work on my stuff. And
Yeah.
I'm working on an oil painting for the first time in like 6 years. I mean, I have been for the last few months, but
Right.
it just, I am so happy that we decided to do, the quote unquote scary thing, because it
Hmm.
has led to me doing the thing that, one of the things I love most in the world is just, painting. Like,
Yeah.
and I get to do that because I made that decision and worked hard to kind of pave the way for it. But today was just like, oh my God, I love doing this. And I am very glad that this year I made that decision to work my way towards this. And I'm working on it. And it's just really nice that
Yeah.
that this year has led to that. Um,
Yeah. That's a great place to be. I'm looking forward to eventually one day maybe seeing some of this art that you're working on.
no, let's just talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I look forward to being able to share. And I think for next year, that's my if this year was the year of making the decision, navigating your way to get to the point where you can actually work on some of this stuff, the next year is working on this stuff. I mean, I want to just I want it to be the year of like production. Just
Well,
I want to paint, I want to draw, I just want to do this.
okay. Well, let me stop you there. I
Okay,
Our goal for this episode was to talk about, the
okay,
the
very
things
well.
that have like worked and stuck and feel good, and just kind of celebrate that. Um, but I have a list of things that problems that I still encounter every day or nearly every day, or just stuff that we haven't figured out yet, or just things that I want out of next year. So maybe we save that for the next episode, where we
Okay. Yeah,
we,
yeah,
we
yeah,
talk about what do we want from next year, not not resolutions, but like what are we looking
yeah,
for,
yeah, yeah. Okay,
and
all
we'll
right,
just
yeah,
go
yeah.
ahead and do that, and that'll be the next one.
Okay, what one thing I did this year looking back to the past, forgetting
Mhm.
about the future, uh, is I made a point to go to some of the places that I have been wanting to go to for a while. I went to like 3 different art museums, uh, and it was amazing. I've been wanting to go see some art in person, and it's just one of those things. Well, maybe next weekend, maybe a month from now, whatever. Do it later. This year, I made a point to actually go. So that was awesome. I went to this hotel in downtown Orlando with um, some of the other guys from work, and I kind of, bugged them about it until we actually went. But there's this hotel in downtown Orlando that has like, I don't know, like 10 or 12 original Dean Cornwell paintings. And I know you don't know who that is, but
I've heard of that
it,
name, if that
okay,
counts.
because I've said it before, but
Okay. Well, still heard of it.
well, each painting is probably worth like $250,000. Like it, ah, man, it was definitely one of the highlights of my years, just to go and see these paintings in person. It was amazing, and the other museums as well. I got to see an original NC Wyeth and Andrew Wyeth and a bunch of other guys. Anyway, it was awesome. Has nothing to do with, well, it kind of does have
No,
something to
that
do with this. It was that's just one thing that happened this year that was
yeah.
really cool and exciting. Also, we read Dracula.
Yeah,
That was
that was
pretty
fun.
cool. And talked about memory and journaling and writing stuff. And that
Oh,
was also kind of a highlight of this year, but go ahead.
this is, I don't know if this counts or not, but I just wanted to bring it up because a couple people were talking about this on Discord, and I was like, yes, I do that too. So we talked a lot about memory. It's one of the big things that we've like focused on was how you remember stuff, what goes into that, and one of the major parts of that is spaced repetition, where you recall something, and then some period of time later you recall it again, and then some period of time, maybe even much later, you recall it again. That's how stuff stays in your brain. Your brain is always sorting of what do we keep, what do we get rid of, and if you keep re-establishing memories or accessing that, your brain's like, oh, I guess this is important, we'll keep it, right? Been a major theme. It's something, like I said, I use my spaced repetition stuff every day. Like it is fundamental to how I operate now. But this kind of funny flip side of that, this is what they were talking about, that I've noticed too, is that sometimes you don't want to remember something. And I'm not talking about some, horrible trauma, but just like even simple things. Sometimes I'm like, I don't want to remember this. I'm out somewhere hanging out with some friends and like something negative happens. Nothing awful, but just like, a little argument or something kind of unpleasant. And I just know from the way I am that I'm going to ruminate on that all day. And then I'll think about it later, and it'll wind up being the only thing I remember from that experience. And that blows. Like, I have a great time doing fun stuff, and just this one tiny, stupid, negative thing happens, and like, that's all I remember. Hate that. So, having understood more about memory, the approach is now, hey, this negative thing happened. I am going to very intentionally think about something else to avoid me thinking about this thing because I don't want to remember it. And I know that I won't if I don't keep recalling it. And of course, you can't like sit there and go, oh, I'm not going to think about this because that just isn't how it works. So instead, you like have to occupy your mind with something else. So I'll kind of create this like little trigger diversion type thing where the moment I find myself wanting to kind of think about this sort of negative thing, I just pick something else, something that I think is cool or just pleasant, whatever, and I just kind of think about that instead. Like play through that little sequence in my mind and just do that. And it's really effective. And I can't tell you what the negative things were because I don't remember them, which is awesome. But it has prevented me from like winding up with this negative memory stuck in my head. And I think it's a really cool and really, simple but powerful way of approaching that. I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, yeah. You don't typically think about the things you don't want to remember,
Right.
you don't think of a method to not remember something.
Yeah. I mean, the simple, yeah, don't think about it. Like prevent yourself from thinking about that thing and it won't stick in your memory. Okay. I've kind of completed my list here. Do you have any other takeaways from the past year, things that you think are cool?
No, I did I played that concert where
Oh yeah.
we yeah, the music thing. And we talked about how to memorize music and everything. And that was a cool thing that happened because I had played a concert before years ago and things had gone really bad or not really bad, but I had this total lapse in memory where I
Yeah.
couldn't finish the solo. And so I played another show and we had talked about it and it went really well. And so, I mean, it's a small thing, but
Well,
I think it's worth, reminiscing about for a second.
it's
But
not
yeah,
that small.
yeah,
And that was the whole conversation that we had around memory and visual memory versus physical memory and like the different types of memory that go into music and all that.
yeah, yeah. So that's just a fun little thing.
I'm so glad for
But yeah,
both of us that worked out.
yeah, but that's about it for me.
Cool. All right. Well, we can leave it there. Uh, for any of the listeners, if there's anything that you maybe are feeling good about this past year, something you're kind of happy with, let us know. I'd love to hear what that might be for you. And I think we'll come back next week with, we'll talk about what we're looking for next year. Cool. All right. So we would love some reviews if you're on a podcast platform. Those help us out tremendously if you want to support the show. You can also, if you're on YouTube, do all the normal YouTube stuff, like and ring bells and crap like that. Um, we have some merch available, and there's a link for that. You can support the show. Thank you so much for everyone who does. Uh, Thanks for being with us for this year. Honestly, altogether, it's really been good. I'm genuinely really happy with the just the progress and things that have changed for me in this past year. It's been super positive for me. And thank you so much to all the listeners and everybody who's given their feedback and thoughts on it. The amount of stuff that we've heard from the community is really tremendous. I really can't understate how much discussion and reflection and ideas and comments that we've got. It's like really mind blowing. So thank you so much. We'll see you next year ish.
Or
Maybe
maybe
actually,
just next,
maybe
maybe
next
next
week.
week.
Either next week or next year. I think
Yeah.
just next week. I kind of forgot that like Christmas and then New Year's. That's later. Anyway, all right. We'll see you whenever.